This is Not Worth Living, a podcast that features creatives interviewing themselves with a preset list of questions. Unlike other podcasts that feel like conversation between friends, this one aims to feel like eavesdropping on a psychiatrist's visit. Today's episode features...
Hey, this is Logan Berry. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, whenever you're listening to this. It's 4:08 p.m. I'm sitting under a tree. I'm in a park on the north side of Chicago. It's 30 degrees. I'm in a winter coat, pants, shirt, undergarments, scarf, gloves. It's my first day off in 4 days, so I thought it would be a good time to self-interview, drinking coffee, pulling up the questions. Thank you for having me on Ira Red, first and foremost. I'm going to go out of order. So, what do you do differently from other people? I've told a lot of people this, and they're always surprised. I listen to podcasts on 1.5 to 2.0 speed, depending on how slow the speaker is talking. I have a hard time understanding people speaking slowly. Plus, there's so much good stuff out there that I just love speeding things along. Sometimes when I hear people at regular speed that I'm used to hearing at 2.0 speed, I think they sound drunk. And also the 2.0 speed gives people a really enthusiastic quality that is sometimes missing from regular speed. So maybe you want to listen to this at a faster speed to see what I'm talking about. Since this is a writer podcast, I'll also say something writerly, I suppose. A piece of advice or thing I like to do that not everybody does, that I don't always adhere to, but I think is a good rule of thumb, is when you have an idea for an artistic work, begin at the end. Oftentimes, artworks end with something irrevocable, an emotional state, a point in the action where nothing can be the same. Start there. See what happens. Again, I don't always adhere to that, but I'm trying to do that more. Next question. What makes you tick? What makes me tick? God, my wife, my baby. They're mine first and foremost. We had our first baby on April 1st, an April Fool's baby. The night we slept in the hospital after she was born, as I fell asleep, I imagined my heart and felt it tear open to create a space for our baby. It's unlike anything else. If you're scared to have a child, or you're worried that the timing is not right, I would say go for it, because you will adapt to that child, and then also there's never a good time. But if you don't want to have kids, then don't have kids. What makes me tick? Next year, I'm going to direct 3 plays in repertory. They're called The Sarcoma Cycle, altogether, a thematic trilogy of plays. They're composed of Nano Blade 1998, Spring Break 2020, and The Morning Light 2050. I wrote the plays in 2021 while I was taking my mom to chemotherapy and through this process of stem cell transplant. They're really maximalist and also reflect the intimate context in which they were written. I wrote them because I needed something to escape to during that time. And in 2022, I held some readings at my apartment with the 5 actors of the plays. The same 5 actors appear in all 3 plays. We read them on different dates. I took their notes. We discussed them. I asked if you could mount one of these plays in a full production, which one would it be? And they unanimously said they'd want to do all 3. They feel irreducible to one. They make more sense as a thematic trilogy. So I was inspired by that passion, especially since we have no money. Just finished a successful fundraiser, so we are going to be mount all 3 plays on a micro budget next year. Why does this make me tick? Because the logistics of making this happen are so intense that for a long time before we raised the money, I was having nightmares every night about not having enough funds or running out of funds partway through. And then also every 30 seconds, I would think about the plays. They were just constantly on my mind. I'm trying to get all the administrative and logistical work done first so that once we're rehearsing next year, I can be really present with the actors. In Transmissions to Our Toe, the booklet that Evan Iselin put out with Self-Fuck a few years ago, I say in that one that when I direct plays, it feels like I'm time traveling back to the present to sort of stage what I experience in the future as an audience member. It's not like a one-for-one translation. Just when you envision the plays, or when I do, I experience them emotionally in color in terms of like imagery, and with the actors whose agency and creativity I honor and want more than anything else in the rehearsal room, try to achieve those pictures and situations. The plays are really making me tick. Thank you to everybody who contributed, shared to the fundraiser. It means a lot. Would you open an envelope with your death date? Yes, I would. For practical reasons. What was the first time you remember creating something intentionally? It's a good question. I remember in kindergarten, my mom got me a cardboard haunted house that was very, very tall and it had like a black and white coloring book outlined to it, so like you could go into it and then like color it. I remember Samantha Lee from kindergarten coming over and we were pretending to be cats in that haunted house. Did I really create that haunted house? I mean, maybe. It came pre-packaged, but we did stuff with it, scribbled and crawled around. I also remember after school, like drawing class maybe, and the instructor teaching us how to draw scale, like a sunrise, so it appears to be farther back in the image. It was really simple. But I remember being driven home in that kind of post-school days. There was a tornado on the horizon. We weren't really scared. But I thought to myself, I'd like to be an artist when I grow up. That seems like a primal moment relating to early creativity. But when I hit second grade, I became more socially conscious. I started a new school. And the first day we had to say what we wanted to be when we grew up. I said I wanted to be a Pokemon master because I thought people would like me more. As I've gotten older, I think that the pre-second grade instincts are the correct ones. And I'm trying to listen to some of those echoes. What keeps you motivated? Coffee, but first coffee. With the plays, having so many people involved and excited makes me motivated. It's a lot of pressure, but good pressure. I wrote the roles for specific performers, and that mutual creation is really invigorating, I think, for all of us. With the books, the writing itself can be really gratifying. Sometimes it feels like solving a puzzle, especially if there's meter or sound involved. And I want it all at once. I want emotion, image, sound, and meter. So a lot of different technical parts. Is emotion or intensity craft? I don't know. But you can know it when you smell it. I'm pretty lazy, so over the years I've worked really hard to not be so lazy and indulge that part of myself. What do I even sound like? It's really weird to self-interview. I probably won't listen to this, but I feel like I'm talking in this way that feels very mechanical or nervous. But I hope you're having a good time anyway. I do have a meditation practice, 20 minutes twice per day. I started that in 2018, 2019. It fell to the wayside a bit when we had our baby, but listening to Andrew Wilt's episode on this show inspired me to text him. He has 3 children, and ask him, how do you find the time to do so much meditating? And he replied very generously with the number of hours in the day, the number of hours in the week. And it inspired me to get back with it. Keeps me grounded, keeps the thoughts orderly, helps me, I think, triage, prioritize. When I first started doing it, it made colors brighter. So maybe it augments presence or something like that. Who inspires you at the moment? So many people. First of all, I'll say people who publish books really inspire me. Andrew, as mentioned, John Treffery, Mike Correo, Mike Klein, who did this really interesting publishing of his latest work, Ben DeVos, Manuel Marrero, Caro Macon, Kathleen Rooney. It seems like a really hard thing to do. I've worked as a teacher, a GED teacher. I've worked as an artistic director of the theater company. So I can kind of relate to the demands that publishers must have on a certain level, but with theater, it's ephemeral, and you're constantly moving on to the next thing. The fact that presses accrete material, so they have to kind of keep up with numbers and logistics on all their works, it just seems like it gets more difficult rather than less difficult. And moreover, you're dealing with artists, so that can bring a lot of really tough personalities. And you're not just doing something that will be done in a few months. You're doing something that potentially could last a long time. So essentially, you're responsible for making people's dreams come true in many ways, and then also keeping up with the finances and all the extra stuff around that. It's a lot of responsibility, and I don't think everybody's cut out for it. And I've been fortunate to work with really cool people, but I'm inspired by that because it takes a tenacity and commitment to, I would assume, the form that I find really invigorating. Who else inspires me at the moment? All the actors I work with are really amazing. Sarah Zalek, look them up. They're a Butoh performance artist in Chicago. They're really amazing. They're going to be acting in the play. Dylan Fahum, really, really excellent, funny performer. Artistic director of the Runaways Lab in Chicago. Electra Tremulous, she's a musician, makeup artist, really, really amazing performer. Dan Mersikovich, another excellent actor. He might be a genius, honestly. And I'm hoping that people see what he's capable of in the plays and hire him for their productions. And lastly, Jake Flum, who's really, really smart performer, really resourceful, really thinks outside the box, asks really good questions, runs a theater troupe that is co-producing the plays called Hate Lab. Just really, really amazing group. So I'm inspired by them. The filmmaker, Brian Pollan, he shoots these really intricate, special effects driven, micro-budget horror movies. I think he's located on the East Coast. He directs them, produces them, and they are unbelievable, like what he pulls off for the budget. But then even without considering the budget, they're just really, really fucked up, impacting films that it seems like he's working with his friends. A lot of people appear in many of the films. I'd definitely recommend Cryptic Plasm and Bone Sickness. Just really inspiring stuff. And frankly, I get a little embarrassed because like one of his films allegedly had a $4,000 budget. Wow. Full-length movie for that much money. And I just raised $6,000 for my plays. I mean, it's 3 full-length plays. And after stipends and paying for the space, you can kind of divvy up how much each play actually gets. But still, it does feel a little bit shameful when I see someone can do something so intricate on that shoestring budget. So yeah, Brian Pollan, amazing movies. You can buy DVDs. I don't know if there are Blu-rays, but definitely DVDs on eBay. I think he runs his own eBay store. Highly, highly recommend. Who inspires me at the moment? I could keep going, and I will. I started a couple of long books when the baby was born. I use physical copies and digital copies so that when I'm holding her and she doesn't want or need my full attention, I can do audio. And then the physical, of course, so I can attend to style, etc. So one of the books I started was The Possessed by Dostoevsky. Finally hit a groove with that about a month ago. Absolutely amazing book. It feels very 2020s, a lot of secrets, a lot of confusing political affiliations. Where is the money coming from? Who's trying to disrupt who in this social circle? In fact, it turns out Camus adapted it using his Nobel money, or Pulitzer. I guess it would probably be Nobel. One of the last things he did in his life was stage a really intricate production of it. The other long book I started and I'm almost done with is Wendy S. Painting's Aberration in the Heartland of the Real. It's this really long tome investigation into the life of Timothy McVeigh. It's a really smart work that presents 5 versions of his life and deeds. I really appreciate works right now that kind of dramatize or demonstrate how, in the breakdown of consensus reality, different factions, competing ideological commitments result in different interpretations of the same event. I was telling a friend about Painting's book, and he brought up Don DeLillo's Libra, which is kind of like a fictional account of the JFK assassination and has a lot to do with Lee Harvey Oswald, he was saying. And I think Painting definitely drew inspiration from that book because there are quotes from Libra as like chapter epigraphs. What do you call an epigraph that starts a chapter? Does that have its own name? But you know what I mean. But the difference is Painting's book is based off of her own investigations and trying to present different groups' interpretations of the Oklahoma City bombing and what led to that. So really enjoy that. I'm going to go back to the question, what keeps you motivated? A couple of key things bother me and I return to constantly in my creative endeavors. The question of time and the question of evil. Regarding the latter, I'm always trying to find the right definition of evil. I haven't settled onto one yet. The historical definitions in them of themselves often feel insufficient. So, for example, like the Augustinian view would be that evil is the privation of goodness. So the lack of goodness, that's what you're experiencing as evil. To contrast that with a different version would be something like evil being a positive force in the universe, not as in positive as in good, but positive as it has like status and intensity, and it works its way through the world. I feel like Gnosticism believes evil is a positive force in the world because they, in many acts, they think that the being that created the world is evil or flawed, and that through different rituals you can aspire toward a more primary creator that is good. And then, of course, well, I don't want to get through all this track. The privation and positive one both feel a little insufficient to me. I do think the positive, evil being a positive force one resonates with me more. I think evil does work its way through people, and like people and things become spaces. Objects can be like vectors of evil, like when you go to a place and you get bad vibes, like what happened there. And that maybe relates to the time question, which I'll get to in a second. I did want to read you a quote that I really liked regarding the privation version that I found rather interesting. So this is from Tikkun, the like French anarchist, kind of like nihilist collective. This is from their manifesto. Of course, this means war. So here's what they say. When a civilization is ruined, its bankruptcy must be declared. There's no point cleaning house when the house is falling apart. Goals aren't lacking. Nihilism is nothing. It's not a question of means. Powerlessness is no excuse. The value of the means has to do with the ends. Everything that is good. The world of the klipoth, the spectacle, is all entirely evil. Evil isn't a substance. If it were, it would be good. The mystery of the effectiveness of evil comes down to the fact that evil doesn't exist. It's just an act of nothingness. That weird word, klipoth, I don't know if I'm pronouncing it correctly. I'd looked it up before. It is, I think a Kabbalah term having to do with like husks or shells. Iterations of evil, maybe. I'm probably getting that wrong. But at any rate, I did want to share that because I thought it was one of the more compelling privation of goodness quotes I'd heard before. I'm in a constant electronic communication with the writer Charlene Ellsby. And I shared this quote with her because she also is constantly exploring evil. And I really appreciated her response to this Tikkun quote. And she felt like it was really lacking because in her hermeneutic, evil is something that happens. And this is not exactly, this Tikkun thing is not really an action. It's more of like a stagnant definition. I thought that was rather compelling. I'll also say that Tikkun kind of resonated with me. I saw this reality show, maybe you've seen it, on Max. I think it used to be on BBC. It's called, what is it called? It's called like Naked Dating or something like that. Just look it up. Look up Naked Dating Show. Basically, the premise is the contestant gets to see 5 eligible bachelors, bachelorettes, whatever, and they see the bottom part of them first, like the foot through the genitals, and they'll eliminate somebody based off of that. Then they get to see a little more, so up to the shoulders. Then they get to see the person's head, and after every subsequent thing, they get rid of somebody, and then they get to hear them talk, and then when it's down to 2, the 2 get to see the contestant naked, and then the contestant chooses one of them to go on a date. And I mean, it's like so stupid and like grim. It just, like, the tone of it is so nonchalant and denuded of any eroticism. It feels like exactly what Tikkun was getting at. It just feels like fucking nothing. There you have it. Oh yeah, the question of time. Yeah, so I'm always interested in time. There's so many different theological and scientific interpretations of time. There actually is a version that resonates with me on like a gut level, which is that all time is just one moment, like one object. Like it all exists at once. And I guess it sort of has some notes of the Nietzschean eternal return concept. Like, he kind of poses the question, if you had to live the same life over and over with the same decisions, would you do it? I'm probably butchering that, but at any rate, essentially time just is this one thing, and matter is an emergent property of time, which just is. Maybe I like that one because it feels like when you do something, you leave a residue in that moment, even if that moment is dead. And I'm not trying to be like, we live forever. So I think that is just an ethical can of worms that I won't adhere to. But the idea that everything exists somewhere, or I don't even think I have language sufficient to assignate it into a strata of any sort of plane of being. But the fact that all that is adds a kind of intensity to every moment. What's your latest project? I already talked about the plays, but I'll talk about them a little bit more. Nanoblade 1998 is set at the Cook County Hospital in the late 90s during a transition between an old way of doing medicine called pathophysiological medicine into the new way of doing medicine, which is called evidence-based medicine. I arrived at that subject matter because I was pursuing the question, why do doctors always stare at the computer when you're being seen by them? Even as a child of the 90s, I remember when doctors were more attentive to us as patients. For my mom, when she was getting her treatment, she was painfully attuned to the fact that there's this constant digital mediation between her and the healthcare providers. And I think it's a very universal question. Pathophysiological medicine relied more on the doctor's specific experiences, whereas evidence-based medicine standardizes practices across all hospitals. So if you get a tummy ache in Albuquerque, Chicago, or Toronto, you're likely to get the same treatment from all the different hospitals. So there are definitely pros and cons to the new paradigm. But one crappy thing about it is that it becomes a really strong disciplinary mechanism for the healthcare practitioners. Like when they are selecting a course of treatment for you and there's like a drop-down menu, if they select something that is maybe different from the normal course of actions because maybe the doctor has seen something that might help in your particular situation, they might get a pop-up on their screen that is almost like a warning. Like, are you sure you want to do that? And it has a lot to do with insurance and stuff like that. So very grim. But Nanoblade 1998 explores that transition through the genre of like steamy hospital drama with some occult elements to it as well. The next one is Spring Break 2020. It's a grand guignol, which is like this 19th century popular French style of theater that was all about scaring the audience and making them grossed out, really chilling, very smutty horror stuff. It's the inspiration for the slasher genre of film. So it's a grand guignol set during the COVID lockdowns, with a bunch of teenagers, and the whole play, the characters are on FaceTime calls with each other, and you see their phone screens projected behind them in the play. And then the third play is called The Morning Light 2050, morning with MOU. It's about virtual reality technology that allows you to communicate with dead loved ones in virtual reality. It's about the family of the CEO who's invented this apparatus. The wife of the CEO is declining from cancer and also abusing the morning light, talking with her dead son in the digital realm, receiving prophecies from him. And her interaction with the son is threatening to tear the family apart. So as you can see, it's not like the plays that compose the sarcoma cycle are not like, they're three separate stories. They're connected thematically by death, grief, technology, intensity. Same by the actors in all three distinct time periods. It's going to be really insane, and I hope you can come see it. What's my latest project? Got a couple of books coming out in 24 and 25. But in terms of new works, I have a lot of ideas. I'm really interested in form, so I'm always trying to consider not just what, but how I want to endeavor to create something. If money was no object, what would be your dream project? So years ago, I would have said I would just be doing what I'm doing now, but pay my collaborators more, and that's still true to an extent. I would love to pay my collaborators more, but I've really hit a groove in the creative output, and if someone were to give me an infinite slush fund to support my family, I have a full-time job in addition to all the creative stuff. So if someone were to pay me enough to support my family and do the creative stuff, I would jump on that opportunity. I have a lot of ideas, as many of us do. So I would love, what do you call that, a benefactor? If you want, if you're listening to this and you're looking for somebody to give a trust fund to, is that how that works? I think I'm a good option. I can make a lot happen with a small amount, but I wouldn't mind working on a larger scale, and I think I could rise to that occasion. So to attend to the question a little bit more specifically, if money was no object, what would your dream project be? I mean, right off the cuff, I would probably buy or rent an abandoned motel. I have some ideas for a place that would be really cool to happen in such a location. When we were looking for places to do the sarcoma cycle, I started by price gauging what traditional theater spaces were asking for. And they were so cost prohibitive. I'm sure it has a lot to do with their mortgages and their rents and so forth, but it's unbelievable how they'll nickel and dime you and how prohibitive all these spaces are. And so I wasn't surprised. It's always kind of been that way for the scale I'm working at. But also, I don't super love the black box or traditional theater look, because so many of the design elements are so codified. Like, for example, the sort of like lighting rigs that many theaters use. Like, there's like, everybody does the same kind of lighting style to convey nighttime, to convey rain. Like, it's all this kind of like prefabricated stuff. And so I like going into raw, I guess you call it site-specific spaces, because they have their own energies, and then also you have to be more creative with the lights and sound and everything. But be that as it may, if I had a lot of money, I would rent really cool locations to do these productions. Is there a quote or motto that you live by? Not that I live by, but I do really appreciate koans and earworms and lines from songs and books and plays that and poems that just get stuck in your head and you can never really reconcile. There's one that I think about a lot, which is a stage direction in August Wilson's Fences, where he describes this character as liking the idea of being a musician more than actually being a musician. What a great specification and short way of summing someone up very, very quickly. Would you be friends with yourself? It's such a strange question to consider. Meeting myself, maybe it would be one of those things where one of us would have to die. Like, who's the real Logan? I feel like I would win in that duel, but maybe I would. What would you like your epitaph to say? Well, I'm going to live forever, so I won't have an epitaph. I hope you have a splendid rest of your day, and that this finds you thriving and finding peace. Lots of love. Bye-bye.